To this now, tensions remain high ahead of the eviction of refugees outside the United Nations offices in Pretoria. The sheriff of the court has officially delivered the eviction court order to the refugees outside the offices of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees in Brooklyn this morning. Now, the sheriff of the court was accompanied by the state attorney and officials from Home Affairs to start the process of removing the refugees. A high law enforcement contingent is also present outside the UN offices. The joint operation is to remove the group is facilitated by police, Home Affairs, Social Development and Gauteng Emergency Services. More than 100 refugees have been living on the pavement of the UNHCR offices since 2019. They comprise mostly of Congolese, Burundians and Kenyans who fled xenophobic attacks that broke out in 2019 in Pretoria. The safety of many small children is also of major concern. Now, let's discuss this this story further now. We are joined currently via Zoom by Laura Padoan, and she's from the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, and she's a spokesperson there. Laura, I mean, this story, of course, we saw some of the accounts of the parents being very worried about not only being removed to a place where they considered a refuge for some time, but also being separated from their children. Talk to us about how concerned you are about this matter.
That's right. Thank you. Well, so far the operation has been carried out very peacefully, and we are relieved that actually there hasn't been violence or resistance as we had feared. So thus far, we have been working with the authorities, both the police and the city of Tshwane, to ensure that all of the rights and the safety of the refugees are guaranteed, and particularly the rights of the children, who we have been very, very concerned about, of course.
Now, a lot of questions have obviously been have arisen in terms of, I mean, some of these refugees were camped outside the United Nations High Commission for Refugees in Pretoria since 2019, as we heard obviously in that clip, since those xenophobic attacks in Pretoria. What has the UN done up to so far? Because now we know that these individuals are being moved to Lindela Repatriation Center. Of course, we know that that also is not a place that is conducive enough to house people that are seeking a refuge in this country.
Well, that's right. This particular group have been living outside the UNHCR office in Brooklyn for just over a year now, and they have been living in very unsafe and unsanitary conditions. These are not ideal conditions for children and families to be living in. There's not sufficient shelter. It's a very dangerous, busy road, and we have been discussing with the refugees alternatives, because this is no kind of solution for anybody to be living outside on the streets. So the families, some of the families have chosen to voluntarily go with the authorities and be taken to Lindela Repatriation Center. We have been assured by authorities that families will remain together and they will not be separated. At the centre, there will at least be adequate shelter, medical facilities and sanitation, which aren't currently available on the streets outside the office. So at least for those families who have gone, that will be available. Other refugees who have been removed as part of the eviction operation today have gone into the community and dispersed, presumably living with friends. We don't know, and we hope to hear more back from our partners by the end of today about their whereabouts. We have been listening to the concerns of the refugees. We've been discussing with them alternative solutions, because it's not ideal for them to be going to Lindela, and this is for around 6 months. We've discussed the possibility of them reintegrating back into the community, or also repatriating to their countries of origin where it is safe for them to do so and where they're undertaking that decision voluntarily.
Laura, I mean, we heard, obviously, our journalists have been on the ground there since early this morning when this happened. The concerns I'm raising are concerns that have been raised by not only the lawyers that are representing these refugees, but also the refugees themselves, saying, more could have been done by yourselves, but more also could have been done by the South African government. So essentially what I'm asking you, are you satisfied that during the 6 months period, Lindela Repatriation Center is the solution? I mean, also you talk of possibly also, taking them back to their countries, but we know and we've heard them plead with this government that they are not safe in those countries. And we also saw lots of women and children. I mean, these children have not been going to school for close to 5 years. What are the solutions? I mean, you've had more than, 3 years?
This particular group, as I said, have been living outside our office for just over a year. And living on the streets outside our office is not the solution. And as you say, the children have not been in school whilst they've been living there. So we were sure that that situation had to be resolved and their removal was inevitable. So we have been in constant dialogue with the campers over the last year to advise them and counsel them about the other options that have been available to them. Around 15 of the group have chosen to voluntarily return to areas of DR Congo that it's safe to return to. Now, UNHCR would only advise on voluntary repatriation to safe areas. So if someone is not willing to return, and if we deem that an area is not safe, then we would not assist in that movement. So that has been one option. Other refugees have gone back and reintegrated into the communities in South Africa where they had been previously living and where children can go to school, because our primary concern and our priority is very much for the well-being of children, because no one wants to see children out of school, losing out on education and valuable time. It's very, very important that those families are in a safe place where children can access education. Lindela may not be the best solution, and is certainly not a long-term solution, but families will at least be able to access medical assistance. They'll have sanitation and shelter there, which aren't available living on the streets outside the UNHCR office.
Do you know how many of the children were separated from their mothers this morning, and have they been reconciled with their parents? And also, you talk about Lindela being just at this very moment a 6-month solution. During that 6 months, do we know if any children will be able to go to school during that time?
That's really a question for the authorities, and we do hope that all efforts are made to ensure that children can enjoy their rights to education, and that all safeguards and protection are afforded to that group. We will be working with authorities closely and following up and carefully monitoring the situation to ensure that the refugees are given the proper advice, counselling and protection that they need.
At the moment, of course, we're talking about, and as we wrap up our conversation, we're talking about refugees that were camped out your doorstep. Do you know of any similar situations where refugees are in trouble of being evacuated and also being moved to centres like Lindela?
Well, there is a similar situation that has happened in Cape Town. Also across the world, refugees do come to UNHCR offices, and as a humanitarian, human rights-based organisation, we welcome the rights of people to protest and express their concerns to UNHCR. We are the refugee agency to provide protection for refugees, and we welcome and encourage dialogue with people to express their concerns if it's done in a peaceful way. So there certainly have been similar situations, not just in South Africa, but in other countries around the world. We always try to have open dialogue and discussions to ensure that any concerns are addressed. And we do take those concerns very seriously, and that if refugees are living in fear or concerned about their safety, then our protection staff are very well trained to be able to offer the appropriate advice and protection. We've also set up a dedicated helpline, and we do have a web page as as well, offering protection and advice. We also work with our partners in the NGO community to ensure that they're providing the correct advice and counselling to people in need, because we really don't want to see people living on the streets. As I've said, it's not safe or sanitary. We regret that people haven't moved on voluntarily before now, but we very much hope that we can offer longer term solutions such as voluntary repatriation, reintegration into communities, so that people aren't living on the streets, but also they're not living in fear of their lives either.
All right, Laura, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Really do appreciate it. Laura Padoan, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees spokesperson. Of course, this follows the removal of those 104 refugees who have been camping on the pavement of the UNHCR offices in Pretoria on and off since 2019.